Man, that was an absolutely awesome game of basketball. The Pacers are now up 2-1 in this series, and what a performance they put on tonight. They guarded SGA about as well as you possibly can against a player of his caliber. The guy shot below 50% from the field, managed only 6 free throws, and had more turnovers than assists. That's elite defensive execution right there. There were some concerns with Miles Turner on screen actions that we'll dive into later, and JDUB was definitely putting Nesmith through hell at times. But besides that, and maybe one Thomas Bryant switch on SGA that didn't go the Pacers' way, their defense tonight was absolutely spectacular. Lou Dort was in these defensive possessions as well, but Haliburton was finding ways to get free for floaters off these actions. Whether it was off of iHeart or off of Chet dropping back in coverage, he was decisive and confident. During a stoppage in play, had his hands on his knees and was bending down to catch his breath. SGA usually does not look that tired, and I think this physical exhaustion led to some crucial mistakes down the stretch. But he just didn't have the legs to make the defensive play. Earlier, there was Haliburton's offensive rebound putback where literally no one was boxing him out. You just having to deal with this. Pacers team grinding you down for the full 48 minutes. This was a missed opportunity in the previous game that they clearly identified and corrected. I think one of those possessions led to his almost dunk on JG Dub that was absolutely crazy to watch. The athleticism and aggression he showed in that moment was impressive. The coaching staff deserves credit for recognizing this mismatch and consistently attacking it throughout the contest. In this game, it was clear they found their answer. Nothing is going to be automatic against the defense as good as Oklahoma City's, but they found 2 consistent approaches, one other than Turner's screening for Siakam, to create different angles. This is the allure of Ben Mathurin that we've been talking about. This is the exact conversation Pacers fans have been having for years with this player. Because Rick Carlisle knows more about basketball than I could ever imagine knowing. The Pacers did exactly that in this game, and Mathurin rewarded their trust with efficient, impactful play that contributed significantly to this crucial victory. The way they positioned him in the offense gave him clear reads, put him in situations where his natural scoring ability could shine through. That's elite coaching. Going into this series, I remember thinking I wasn't super confident with him being a primary decision maker versus this OKC Team-S defense, which is so smart and disciplined. And when you've got a smaller defender on you, they're going to find you in the post. Eventually, among all of his great passing plays throughout the game, there was this really spectacular skip pass to Nesmith that perfectly exemplified how the Pacers were wearing down Oklahoma City. The Pacers identified what worked, doubled down on it, and executed it consistently throughout the game. Siakam responded with aggression and precision, making the Thunder pay every time they tried to hide a smaller defender on him. When you play the Pacers, you're going to get tired as the game progresses, and that fatigue was starting to show on the Thunder players. More importantly, he just had more confident moments where his mentality was simply, I'm going to take a 3 if the opportunity presents itself. I don't know if you could ask for a whole lot more from this defensive unit. They basically allowed him to operate in a straight line, getting downhill and into his pull-up jumper against bigs dropping back on screens. This is the perfect scenario for Mathurin's skill set, when he can just attack in a straight line and not have to make complex reads or navigate through multiple defenders. Also might have contributed to that play, where he didn't get back in transition when someone rebounded his own miss. It's leading to a kick out to Nembhard. They got fouled on that possession, and then Nembhard made the shot when the play resumed. A momentum-shifting sequence. Both Haliburton and Siakam had huge bounce-back games after their previous struggles. And the way they simplified the game for Mathurin in this one was brilliant. Letting him operate in a straight line in the middle of the floor versus a big dropping back on screens. The Thunder's conditioning and depth were being tested. And in this particular game, the Pacers' relentless pace and energy seemed to win that battle. It's a testament to Indiana's preparation and their understanding of how to exploit opponents over 4 quarters. That's the perfect spot for Mathurin to showcase his talents. TJ McConnell was coming out of nowhere to get turnovers off inbounds plays, showing that veteran savvy. Where do we even start breaking down this masterpiece? I think we've got to start with Haliburton, because he was the biggest storyline after the last game. Haliburton was absolutely the biggest factor tonight after his struggles in the previous game. What I noticed immediately was that there were more DHO's dribble handoffs rather than just simple screens all the time. Even when it was a DHO situation, he was running into it from Turner, and then Turner might re-screen as Haliburton crosses over again to get a favorable matchup. They managed to get SGA on a switch a couple of times through these actions, and there was just something different about making his defender move. The second a screen would come from whoever was setting it, I can see Dort trying to prepare for the screen. Haliburton would immediately go up with a pull-up three. Here's something really telling about how this game unfolded. SGA late in that game with just a couple minutes left, that fatigue potentially led to the closeout he had on Nesmith being, I'll just say, not great. The basket that might have sealed the game was Siakam getting a leak-out opportunity where SGA was the lone defender back. This is exactly what Rick Carlisle wants, to make teams work for everything, gradually wear them down through the course of the game. Getting to Siakam's performance very early in this game, they established a clear game plan. If he's got Kassan or SGA matched up on him, we are going to look for him immediately. I also thought they were able to get Siakam some more opportunities, being the ball handler in screen situations, where Haliburton or Nesmith would screen for him instead of him always being the screener. The questions I had coming into this series for the Pacers were, is there one thing they can really attack versus this OKC defense? This kind of strategic adjustment shows the difference between good teams and great teams. I've already touched on Mathurin, but let me expand on how they simplified the game for him in this contest. It's still wild to see his shot-making ability and everything else he brings to the table. But Rick Carlisle found a way to maximize Mathurin's strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. When you can take a young, talented player like Mathurin and give him a defined role where he can succeed, you're setting both the player and the team up for success. Now let's flip to the other side and talk about how the Pacers defended SGA. He shot 9 for 20 from the field, had more turnovers than assists, and only got to the free throw line 6 times. I've mentioned these numbers already. Sure, they were still fouling him sometimes again. He had 6 free throws. But that's about the most you can ask for when defending a player of SGA's caliber. They were physical without being reckless, disciplined without being passive. But they bear repeating because they represent excellent defensive execution against one of the league's best players. The way that Nembhard and Shepherd were consistently putting their chest into SGA on his drives while keeping their hands up was textbook defense.
You're on JDUB screens.
And there were still some successful moments for OKC, and then recover back to, let's say, Ihart, who then wasn't able to convert the layup. He'd pass it off. Chet would get a turnover. Plays like that. Nesmith was pressuring JW with similar intensity. Nesmith had some really impressive moments guarding JW in this game. And honestly, JDUB was definitely risking offensive fouls with how physically he was attacking Nesmith. It was surprising that none of those aggressive drives were called as offensive fouls. While they had enough of those plays work out in their favor for the game overall, it still felt like the Thunder probably scored on more of those screen situations than they didn't. When you can turn defense into offense, the way the Pacers did in this game, you're not just getting stops. You're creating momentum swings that can deflate the opposing team. It's one thing to play great defense for stretches, but to sustain that level of focus and execution for 48 minutes against a team as talented as Oklahoma City is remarkable. They were rotating properly, communicating constantly, and making the extra effort plays that championship-level teams make. That Haliburton steal and dunk was one of those momentum-changing plays that had the crowd on their feet and the Thunder calling timeout. They've figured out how to attack OKC's defense consistently. They've found ways to contain SGA without completely stopping him. The way he simplified roles for players like Mathurin, maximized mismatches for players like Siakam, and put Haliburton in position to succeed after his struggles. That's championship-level coaching. The players are executing the game plan at an extremely high level, and you can see their confidence growing with each successful possession. It proved they belong on this stage and can go toe-to-toe with one of the West's elite teams. The series is far from over, but Indiana has seized control and put themselves in an excellent position to advance. And they've shown they can match Oklahoma City's intensity and physicality when it matters most. SGA looked more tired than we typically see him, and that's concerning for a team that needs him to be at his absolute best to win this series. They'll need to dig deeper into their depth and find different ways to attack Indiana's defense. But the key was that the Pacers got enough stops when they absolutely needed them. The adjustment period was visible. but they eventually found the right balance and executed when it mattered most. Like when JDUB had that incredible bullet pass to Chet on the backdoor cut for the dunk. That was directly off of Turner being positioned too high. And Turner was also on the wrong side of the screen. There was that moment when Nembhard and Haliburton doubled SGA, forcing a turnover where he traveled under the pressure. Every player on the floor understood their role and executed it at a high level, which is exactly what you need in playoff basketball. You had Turner's block on Chet, and then when Chet tried to take Turner off the dribble in response, it just became a chaotic scene with bodies all over the place. And at the very least, we are guaranteed to get a very intense Game 5 back in Oklahoma City. Of course, Game 4 is going to be an exciting contest as well, with the Pacers having a chance to take a commanding 3-1 series lead on their home floor. He still made some tough shots over Shepherd and Nembhard throughout the game, because that's what elite players do. But I really think the Pacers did a hell of a job containing him in this game, and that defensive effort was a major factor in their victory. You do not need to be up that high when the screen is set that high up the floor. It was leaving too much space and creating unnecessary advantages for the Thunder's offense. That crossover into the three-pointer on Nesmith in the third quarter was absolutely nasty. I'll give him that. But overall, the Pacers played an exceptional defensive game from start to finish. They were also sprinkling in some well-timed double teams. There was that moment where Obi came out of nowhere to block J-Dub late in the game when JDUB was trying to attack him on a switch. And Obi just pulled off this incredible rim protector impression. The team defense was clicking on all cylinders. I remember one particular instance when SGA was in the post, not the one where he found Isaiah Joe for a three, but a different possession where he was completely overwhelmed by the defensive pressure. I think it resulted in either a shot clock violation or a bad shot. I can't remember exactly, but the point is they disrupted his rhythm. I think it's going to be perfect against SGA. He's too talented for that. I also want to address the pick-and-roll defense against SGA, which at times was, we'll say, frustrating to watch. But they did manage to get a couple of successful defensive possessions late in the game that were crucial. The Thunder were running some very high screens for SGA, like around the half-court line, basically from iHeart and others. And Turner's positioning on these plays was initially problematic. When Turner was positioning himself high up on screens that were set nearly at half-court, I found myself thinking, what are you doing? Eventually, as the game progressed, it felt like they still wanted Turner to be high up on SGA screens, but there were also a couple of plays where Turner was able to get up high, force the ball out of SGA or JDUB's hands later in the game. You had some absolutely crucial defensive possessions that really sealed the victory. Before that sequence, you could see Nembhard pressuring SGA exactly like you'd expect from a smart, veteran-minded player. At the same time, this is exactly what J-Dub has been doing all season and throughout his career. He just goes right at defenders with that physical style. You also had Siakam functioning as a help defender, blocking shots on players like Caruso. There was also that spectacular sequence where Haliburton got the breakaway. Dunk after a steal. That was another one of those plays that originated from Turner being positioned high up on a screen. The transition opportunities that came from their defensive pressure were crucial. What impressed me most was how the Pacers maintained their defensive intensity throughout the entire game. The combination of individual defensive excellence and team defensive concepts created a defensive performance that was truly special to watch. So here we are. The Pacers are up 2-1 in this series. What this game showed us is that the Pacers have found answers to the questions that were surrounding them coming into this series. Rick Carlisle's adjustments have been masterful throughout this series. For Oklahoma City, they're going to need to find ways to combat the Pacers' physicality and energy. But regardless of what happens moving forward, this was a statement game from the Pacers.